The MLB offseason has officially begun. On today's show, we'll talk about key dates to know, roster decisions the Mets have to make, non-tender candidates, Rule 5 draft eligible players, and much more.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the number one daily podcast on the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, we have a ton to discuss on today's show. In the first segment, I'm going to run through some key dates of the offseason to know. Then we're going to start to go into the Mets roster a little bit. We'll talk about those non-tender candidates, the Rule 5 draft eligible prospects in the second segment. We'll close out the show looking at the entire league and trying to determine which players will receive qualifying offers and how that might impact their free agency if the Mets will pursue those players. Let's start off, though, with what we are in right now. There is a 5-day period. You can almost call it a moratorium, where this is a time where team options, player options, all that is decided, mutual options. So this is where Frankie Montas has to decide if he's going to pick up a $17 million option to rehab from Tommy John surgery, which will probably be the easiest decision of his life. Obviously, he is opting in. This is also a window where teams can negotiate with their own free agents before anybody else can sign those players. So there is not a single team right now that can sign Pete Alonso or Edwin Diaz other than the New York Mets. Same thing goes with Ryan Helsley or Cedric Mullins or any of their other free agents. But the other big decision that has to be made over this next 5-day window is which players will receive a qualifying offer. So to go through the specific decisions the Mets are going to make over this first 5-day window, which will end on November 6th, which is Thursday at 5 p.m., when you're talking about contract options, the two big ones obviously are the opt-outs for Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso. Both of them will opt out. I already mentioned Frankie Montas. He will opt into a $17 million play option. AJ Minter is expected to opt into his $11 million play option as well. He's coming off lat surgery. Probably not going to do better than that on the open market. I don't think he's going to get another 1+1 deal if he hit the market. And if he did, it would be of much lesser value than that $11 million. So he should be back with the New York Mets. The club options are, I think, almost no-brainers. The one that's definitely a no-brainer is Brooks Raley, $4.75 million. He was outstanding in the second half. He's going to have that option picked up. Drew Smith is a more interesting one, and it's really just going to be a matter of how his rehab from Tommy John surgery went. If the Mets believe in him, they pick it up. It's a $2 million club option. If not, well, they helped them. They did a good thing for a guy that had been in the organization for a long time, and he becomes a free agent. So that one I think is a lot more up in the air. The price tag, though, assuming that the TJ rehab went well, I think they probably pick it up, but we will not know for sure until this 5-day window ends or if a decision is made prior to that. Now, qualifying offer. Only one guy's going to get it for the Mets. That's Edwin Diaz. He never did get tendered a qualifying offer back in 2022 because he signed in this 5-day window. Now, there's every chance that Edwin Diaz and the Mets could come to terms on a new deal in the 5-day window again. He's pretty much the only free agent that I can even remember from any team that has come to terms in recent memories with their team in that 5-day window. So I would not be surprised if that happened again. But if the Mets are not as eager to bring him back on whatever his agent is looking for right now, and they want him to test this market, maybe he does hit free agency with a qualifying offer attached, in which case, if the Mets don't sign him, they would recoup draft capital if he signs another team. Now, the Mets' other free agents, you have all the guys they picked up at the deadline. Ryan Helsley, Tyler Rogers, Gregory Soto, Cedric Mullins, they were all rentals. So they're all going to hit the market. I think Tyler Rogers is the one the Mets would probably want to pursue the most, but you never know. Maybe they would bring back Gregory Soto. If Ryan Helsley isn't completely scarred, he still has good stuff. I don't know, though. The way things went for Helsley and Mullins feels like they will be on different teams. Now, you also have Jesse Winker, Ryan Stanek, and Griffin Canning. For Winker, I don't even know if his back is good enough to play again. I mean, we never even heard what was going on there, but it seemed like that back issue was very serious. And who knows if it was, I hate to say career threatening, but I mean, we really don't have much information. Ryan Stanek, I don't think. He's still not getting a qualifying offer. Not sure if he's going to come back. Griffin Canning, obviously no QO. Is there a chance the Mets reunite with him and he's allowed to rehab with the team? Potentially, but we'll talk about the 40-man roster a little bit in the next segment, and maybe there's just not enough room for them to take on another player that's recovering from injury. Let's get back to the key dates of the offseason. So that's the 5-day window. That is the first date to know. November 6th, the deadline for options, QOs, exclusive negotiating rights for free agency. Then free agency opens for everybody. The GM meetings take place in Vegas this year, starting on November 10th through the 13th. This is usually just a feeling out period for executives. So there's groundwork done behind the scenes that we don't really hear about, but sometimes things could happen. A trade could happen as a result of conversations had at the GM meetings. The Gold Glove winners were just announced. Luis Torrens and David Peterson were finalists. Neither won. Patrick Bailey and Logan Webb both won those awards for the Giants. So that's your catcher and pitcher NL winners for the Gold Gloves. The Silver Sluggers will be announced on November 6th for the National League. The Mets have Lindor, Alonso, and Soto all up for Silver Sluggers. You then have the Rookie of the Year, the Cy Young, the Rookie of the Year, the Manager of the Year, the Cy Young, and the MVP that are announced on consecutive days starting on November 10th through the 13th. November 18th is the date that players have to accept their qualifying offer. It's at, I think, 22 and change this year, 22.025 million. I can't tell you the exact price tag, but it's just over $22 million. And free agents will then have a couple of weeks to test their market and decide if they want to accept the QO or officially decline it. That is also the same day that teams have to protect players for the Rule 5 draft, November 18th. Again, we're going to talk about that more in the next segment. November 18th to the 20th is the owners' meetings. The non-tender deadline is November 21st. Again, we're going to get into that more in the next segment. You have the winter meetings will begin on December 7th through the 10th in Orlando. Part of the winter meetings is there's going to be the draft lottery where the Mets theoretically could fly into one of those first couple of picks if they get very lucky with those lottery balls. Otherwise, their draft pick is going to drop 10 slots wherever they end up because of being a repeat offender of the luxury tax. Then you have the Rule 5 draft that will also take place during the winter meetings, and that's obviously when a lot of signings happen, trades happen. That is the pinnacle of the MLB offseason. If not for those 3 days that the winter meetings are really going on, things happen right after it too. You really get that window from the beginning of the winter meetings, maybe just before it, you start to see some traction. And then you have from the winter meetings until we get towards the holidays where more stuff can happen. And then you have the free agents that hang on the market well past that. December 15th is the closing of the signing period for 2025 international amateurs. Then it's going to open up again on January 15th for the next year's class. So Elian Pena was the Mets headliner for this previous class, and there are going to be a bunch of signs that'll be announced once you get into the middle of January. January 8th, before that, is actually the unofficial deadline for arbitration-eligible players to come to terms with their teams. And I say unofficial deadline because a lot of teams now operate under file and trial, which is this is the date where teams and players file their numbers. For those of you who aren't aware how arbitration works, the player and his agent comes up with a salary number. And then the team comes up with their number, and the two sides try to meet in the middle and find a ideal contract for that player. If the two sides are too far apart, there is that file and trial method that most teams go with, where they will file their numbers and then they'll just go to the arbitration hearing. There's not a lot of negotiating that takes place after January 8th, before those hearings in the beginning of February, although technically you can negotiate with those players all the way up until the trial. And then we get to the most fun date, which is February 11th, is the voluntary report date for pitchers and catchers to go to spring training. So while it feels like an eternity until we'll get Mets baseball again, actually only a couple months away from pitchers and catchers being back. And then By the time you get to February 20th, spring training games start again. So going to be a lot of fun the next couple months to see how the Mets will remake their roster. And what we're going to talk about in the next segment is some roster decisions that have to be made. Which players are non-tender candidates? Which players might have to be added to the 40-man roster because they're Rule 5 draft eligible? We're going to go through a list of names here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA season's here, and FanDuel is an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5. If it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even if you want to jump in live as the action unfolds. It makes watching football and basketball even more exciting. We got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel is going to make the game day experience so much better. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. We're within 200, getting closer and closer. I'd love to get there by the end of the year. Really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's talk about where the Mets roster stands right now. If you take all the free agents and you remove them, their roster right now sits at 39. Now, you might say, wait a minute, isn't it a 40-man roster? How do you remove all the free agents and you get to 39? Well, that's because you have all the players that were on the 60-day IL that are now right back into that 40-man roster. You can't go above that. In the offseason, there is no IL. Even though you have pitchers who are out with Tommy John surgery, they still count as a player on the roster until you get to setting your rosters in spring training. So as we go through the non-tender candidates, you have to keep that in mind. So you have pitchers like Frankie Montas and Tylor Megill. Decisions had to be made on those guys. The Mets could non-tender either of them. For Megill, they're going to save money if they non-tender him. For Montas, it would just be clearing a roster spot. Now, they could do that. He's owed $17 million. He is unlikely to pitch this next upcoming season. It could be an easy way to just clear a spot. A lot of times teams sort of do right by the player and let them rehab with them. I don't know if that's the case here with Montas. To me, I'd probably just take the roster spot and just cut ties with him, but we'll see what the Mets choose to do there. With Megill, it's interesting because you only have one more year of team control after he rehabs in 2026, but you do have Tylor Megill potentially able to impact your roster in 2027, a guy that's homegrown. I think they let him stay with the team, especially because it's only a projected salary of $2 million. Since he's not pitching, it's not going to see a big bump when he goes into his final year of arbitration. So I expect Megill will likely remain with the Mets. Tyrone Taylor, you could call him a non-tender candidate because he's projected to make somewhere between $3 and $4 million. Maybe you think that you're better served going a different route in center field. I think they're going to keep him though. So I sort of doubt that they would non-tender him. When it comes to pitchers that are hurt, you got Reed Garrett, Max Kranick, and Danny Young, all of which got Tommy John surgery at different points of the season this past year. For Danny Young, he got it the earliest, if memory serves. Then it was Kranick. Garrett was super late in the season. I think they probably keep all of them. For Kranick, you only have 2 more years after this season, but you still have 2 more years. So I think they probably keep him. Debatable though. I could go either way. Reed Garrett's the one that's no doubt they're going to keep him. He's Super 2 eligible, which means you're still going to have 3 more years of arbitration after this season. So that one to me is a slam dunk. Kranick, I would say I'm probably 80-20 thinking that he's going to stay. Danny Young, the Mets have a ton of control. He's still pre-arb and he's a Super 2 candidate. Super 2 just means there's a certain grouping of players who, based on service time, you get an additional year of arbitration. And so Danny Young falls under that mix. So the Mets have 5 years of team control, and that's including the upcoming season. So even if he doesn't pitch in 2026, 4 more years of team control. I think they might keep all those guys, but we'll see. Up in the air, Justin Hageman pitched well, has two options. I think they probably keep him. Jared Young, remember the hitter, left-handed bat who came up a couple times this past season. He still has an option left. So there is a world the Mets keep him. I think they probably non-tender him, but we'll see. Jonathan Pintaro and Alex Carrillo both got added to the roster this year. Did not pitch much and did not pitch well in the minors after coming up to the show. So we'll see if the Mets decide to trim some fat on their 40-man roster by cutting those guys. You also have Austin Warren and Brandon Waddell, who are both out of options, as is Nick Madrigal, who we never saw. He got hurt in spring training or just before spring training, and we never got a real look at him. Madrigal, I think, is a cut. Waddell, I think you might hang on to him, but is he guaranteed to stay on the roster all season? That's the one thing that I think makes it a little more up in the air. Same thing with Austin Warren. I think he probably is a cut. I will do a full show as we get closer to the non-tender deadline, giving you my official predictions, but I just wanted to lay out all the different names to keep in mind of. If they keep all of the injured guys and they cut Hageman, Jared Young, Jonathan Pintaro, Alex Carrillo, Austin Warren, Brandon Waddell, and Nick Madrigal, those 7 cuts would take you down to 32 players on your 40-man roster. So you'd have plenty of room to make offseason additions. But also, for a lot of these guys that I just mentioned, those 7 guys, they're all pre-ARB, I believe. Maybe Austin Warren might be ARB1, but they're all very low-cost players. So you can always make those cuts as you make additions, even if it goes past that November 21st deadline. It's just once you get past that deadline, you are guaranteeing a player a salary. So for these guys who are pre-ARB, I think it's, whatever the minimum is. I believe you'd have to pay them that. You definitely have to pay the arbitration guys if you do cut them after that deadline. So we'll see what the Mets choose to do with all of those roster decisions. And again, I will give you a full show breaking those things down once we get closer to that deadline. We will also do a full show on who will the Mets protect from the Rule 5 draft, but I wanted to give you a list of names for the show today just to give you a primer for this offseason. So you have Nick Morabito. He is the most likely to be added. He's having a good season right now in the Arizona Fall League, had a good year in Double-A. He could be selected by any team and parked on a roster as a 4th outfielder very easily. So I think Nick Morabito is the most likely to be added. You also have DeAndre Smith, who is also in the Arizona Fall League, not having quite as much success, but still he's out there. Utility man, had a good season, could play some second base, play in the outfield. We'll see about him. I think he's unlikely to get added to the roster and probably unlikely to get picked up. And then you have Kevin Parada, who got up to AAA, was pretty bad in 16 games there, but had a decent season in AA. Tough decision on Parada, but I wouldn't add him to the 40. Anyone who has listened to this show for a long time knows I have not been a fan of Kevin Parada as a prospect, but we will see if the Mets decide to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. One other position player who's Rule 5 draft eligible. Oh, there's more. I mean, there's Matt Ruddick and Luke Ritter, Wyatt Young, guys that have been with the team for a very long time. Guys that maybe you just let be minor league free agents anyway, but not really notable players to discuss here. Ron Hernandez is an interesting one because he is a very good defensive catcher, but he's in high A, so I think unlikely that he would get picked up. Now you have a ton of arms who are Rule 5 draft eligible. Felipe De La Cruz, Joander Suarez, Jordan Bieber, Joel Diaz, Matt Allen, Rule 5 draft eligible, but hurt again this year, so I doubt he would get selected. Douglas Orellana, Joshua Cornelia, Luis Moreno, TJ Shook, Brian Meteor, Trey McLaughlin, and Sal Garcia. So a lot of names there that we'll be discussing on the full show. I don't know if any would necessarily get selected the same way Mike Vassell was a real candidate to get selected this past year, just because he was a AAA starting pitcher, had a lot of innings under his belt, gets selected. I think it was by the Rays, and then eventually he ended up on the White Sox and had that great season where he pitched to a 2.5 ERA and got over 100 innings pitched out of the bullpen. A lot of low leverage innings in that role that he was in, but that's how you keep a guy through the Rule 5 draft. So we'll see if any of those arms, really merit being protected. The few that stand out to me right now is Saul Garcia, because he had a very good season, 1.70 ERA in high A and Double-A. Funny enough, Brian Meteor also had a 1.70 ERA in high A and Double-A For Garcia, a ton of strikeouts, 76 Ks, and 47 and 2/3 innings pitched. So maybe, but still being in Double-A, that's a big jump for a team to select him. You never know if they love the arm, though they could. And then Trey McLaughlin was, their closer in Double-A. Had 18 saves, 4.09 ERA, had a much better season in 2024 when he pitched to a 2.34 ERA. Really good stuff, though. Really good splitter. So another guy that's an option. But again, we will have a full show coming up in a couple of weeks here once we creep closer and closer to that deadline, the November 18th deadline for Rule 5 draft players to be protected. I will make my official prediction on which players should be protected and which players should not be protected. So something to look forward to in the coming weeks. Final segment today, we're going to talk about the qualifying offer. As I mentioned, there's only one player in the Mets who could get it, and that is Edwin Diaz. But there are plenty of candidates around the league. Who is going to get the qualifying offer, who is not, and how will that impact whether the Mets are going to chase those free agents? We'll talk about it all to close out the show here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. We got the NFL and the NBA season back right now. And honestly, there's nothing better than being in a stadium or an arena surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping up at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast. It's easy. It's backed by the Game Time guarantee, so you're always going to get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price, plus all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. The app just made it super simple. I can view the seat before I buy, so I know exactly what to expect when I arrive. I'm a Miami Heat fan, so I was actually looking at tickets for this upcoming weekend. Saw a pretty good deal. I'm going to sit on it, though, because the closer you get to game time, the closer the better deals you typically get through the app. And honestly, it's just the fastest, cheapest, and least stressful way I've had to buy tickets in the past. So if you want to get tickets to a game coming up, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We're going to updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. And during the season, we have a line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, we had a very good article go up on justbaseball.com. My managing editor, Leo Morgenstern, put out a really good piece, which is titled, "Which Free Agents Will and Won't Receive a Qualifying Offer?" So let's go through the list. The locks to receive a qualifying offer. You got Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, Dylan Cease, Framber Valdez, Kyle Schwarber, Ranger Suarez, and Edwin Diaz. Now, Kyle Tucker, an unlikely candidate for the New York Mets to pursue. Bo Bichette, theoretically, if you cleared your infield a little bit, you could plug him at second base or third base. I think it's still unlikely, but worth noting. Dylan Cease, the top free agent starting pitcher, in my opinion, based on the fact that it's a couple years younger than Framber Valdez, and he has better stuff than Framber Valdez. Also, I'm still wary about Valdez and just my concerns about whether he is a good clubhouse fit. Didn't love that mix-up he had with his catcher and the way he responded to it. Not a good look for him. We'll see if it impacts his free agent market. He still has been as effective of a pitcher that we've had in baseball, of a left-handed starting pitcher for the past however many years, 5, 6 seasons. He's just been an innings eater, very consistent, good in October. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but he should get, I think, the most when it comes to AAV. So he should get the most per year. I think Dylan Cease is going to get the longest contract, but having to stomach a QO for either of those guys and giving up draft picks might not be as attractive as the guys who may not get a qualifying offer or to just go the trade route, although then you're giving up prospects right away instead of future prospects in terms of draft capital. So there is drawbacks and positives to either route to address the rotation. Kyle Schwarber, to me, why give up, which is kind of crazy. He never got a qualifying offer in the past, but why give up draft capital to Philly for Schwarber, who's older than Pete Alonso, instead of just signing Pete Alonso? Kyle Schwarber's not going to play a better first base than Pete Alonso. He doesn't play at first base. He plays a bad corner outfield, and he really doesn't. So you have less positional flexibility. Schwarber, I think it just makes more sense to sign Pete Alonso than giving him a contract and giving up draft capital. But I understand there's some fans that would love Schwarber, and I'm not going to completely knock that. The guy has been averaging 46 home runs over the past 4 seasons with Philly. So he is probably a better home run hitter than Pete Alonso, funny enough, at this stage in their careers. I think, when it comes to hitting for average, though, Pete Alonso has him beat. Who's the better run producer? Flip a coin. But Ranger Suarez, he's going to get the QO, and to me, that makes it a non-starter to give him a deal. But honestly, if you want to get a good pitcher in free agency, you're going to have to give up draft capital. You have Michael King and Zach Gallen. Both of them also are near locks, as Leo tabs them in the article, to get a QO. They're coming off for King an injury-plagued season, for Gallen a year where he underperformed, but I think both guys have enough upside where they're going to get the QL, because if either accepts it, $22 million for those free agents, or it is $22.025 million, looking at the article here. That's nothing for these guys on a 1-year deal. So I think both of them will get it. Now, the players that have been tabbed as a close call by Leo, we got Brandon Woodruff, Trent Grisham, Devin Williams, Robert Suarez, Gleyber Torres, Jack Flaherty, and Lucas Giolito. Now, Flaherty and Giolito both have options that they could just pick up in their contracts. I don't think either gets the QO. I really don't. Theoretically, I think Boston giving it to Giolito more likely than Flaherty getting it from the Tigers. Gleyber Torres, if he gets it, non-starter for signing him. The Yankees didn't give it to him. I don't know if the Tigers are going to. Robert Suarez and Devin Williams. It's interesting because both of those guys are, set up to be paid pretty well as closers on this market. Devin Williams obviously had a down season, but the track record that he has and the fact that he's a couple years younger than Suarez makes him, I think, still a very attractive free agent. If he has the qualifying offer attached, no chance. I just don't know if the Yankees want to roll the dice on him accepting the QO and running it back at $22 million. For Suarez, I think it's interesting because the Padres could make the case that this is his last chance to hit the market and get a long-term deal, so he'll decline it, but that could be debilitating to them if he picks it up. So I do agree with this entire list, really, as far as guys that are close calls. Trent Grisham, I'd be pretty surprised if the Yankees extended it to him. He had a great season, but do you want to pay him $22 million? I don't know. Brandon Woodruff, I think, will get it, actually, because he's got that same upside. He has a $20 million mutual option. And the way that option works, the Brewers have a $10 million, or he gets a $10 million buyout if the Brewers decline their end of it. So the Brewers are going to pick up the mutual option, because if they don't, then he can hit the market and collect $10 million. They're going to accept their end of it, and then the decision falls on Woodruff. Do you want to take a $20 million, essentially at that point, player option? If you opt out, you get nothing. You just hit the market, and then the Brewers can tag you with the QO. I think that the Brewers accept their end of the mutual option. He declines, becomes a free agent, and then I think the Brewers tag him with the qualifying offer. And for Woodruff, he then might accept that qualifying offer, because then he could hit the market after a healthy season in Milwaukee. At least that would be the hope in 2026, and get a contract the following year where it'd be a longer term deal where he would not be encumbered by the QO. But it really could go a lot of different ways. Still a lot of money for the Brewers to have him, get paid $22 million when he wasn't healthy this past season. So interesting players there. And then we get to, it's possible, according to Leo, Jorge Polanco and Tyler Mahle. I doubt it, but I guess that's the point of it's possible. You never know. Jorge Polanco was a bit of a postseason hero for the Mariners, so those overall numbers were not very good, but his regular season numbers were. So could theoretically, and Tyler Mahle pitched great, but was not healthy this past season. Not happening. Luis Arias, Emilio Pagan. Luis Ariz is not going to make that much money in free agency. I'd be very curious what his deal is going to be, but I would not be interested in him. And then you get Emilio Pagan, who was a really good pitcher this past season for the Reds, racked up a bunch of saves, 32 saves, 2.88 ERA. Really good season. Don't think he gets it. Now we get to players who can't get the qualifying offer. Alex Bregman, Cody Bellinger, Pete Alonso, JT Realmuto, Chris Bassett, Nick Martinez, Raisel Iglesias, Kenley Jansen, Justin Verlander, Marcell Ozuna, and Max Scherzer. So you go through that list. I honestly don't even remember Chris Bassett getting a QF from the Mets, but obviously he did after that great 2022 season that he had. What's interesting about those guys is this makes them all more attractive free agents for the Mets because you don't have to give draft capital to get them. So getting Alex Bregman this year, no draft capital, makes him more attractive than he was last season. Cody Bellinger, same thing, more attractive this time around than he was when he was a free agent a couple years ago. And you go down the line. I think all of those guys are interesting. Switch teams in season, which if you, again, switch teams in the middle of the season, you are not eligible for a QO. Shane Bieber, Eugenio Suarez, Josh Naylor, Harrison Bader, Ryan O'Hearn, Merrill Kelly, Kyle Finnegan, and Ryan Helsley. When it comes to those names, Shane Bieber screams out to me. I love for the Mets to sign Shane Bieber and then trade for an ace. Shane Bieber could be an ace. He pitched well in the playoffs. Because he got traded midseason, there's no QO attached to him. That's the guy that I would love to get on a 1+1 deal. And I would give it to him. So a 1-year deal with a player option for a second year. Now, you can get burned in those deals. Just ask Frankie Montas. But I would be in on it. I would rather make that type of a commitment to Bieber than Michael King or Zach Gallen when you have to give up the draft pick compensation and you probably have to give him the pillow contract. So that's why I think Bieber is more attractive than those other two. It's just a matter of convincing him that you're the best landing spot for him to, I hate to say resurrect his career when he was still very important to the Blue Jays, who nearly won the World Series. But to get back to that ace status that he had in the past and get the long-term deal that I'm sure he eventually covets. When it comes to the other guys that are trading season on the position player front, I mean, good to know that you can get Josh Naylor or Eugenio Suarez without giving up the draft capital, and Harrison Bader can't get the QO either. So all those guys are interesting. But ultimately, for the New York Mets here, I think you can go throughout this offseason and avoid signing almost anybody who's going to get the QO outside of Dylan Cease or Framber Valdez if you decide those are the guys that you want to headline your rotation. And then, of course, maybe Michael King or Zach Gallen falls into that camp as well. But personally, like I mentioned, I'd be more in on a guy like Shane Bieber who does not have that draft pick capital attached. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's show. I hope this was a good primer, giving you everything you need to know about what's in store for the Mets and just across the league in the coming weeks and months of the off season. Tomorrow's show, I will be talking about Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz. We're going to do contracts that they should accept before they hit the open market. So I'll put together an offer for each of these guys that I think is compelling enough for them to sign, but team friendly enough that the Mets should be willing to extend it before they actually test their market. And then we'll kind of talk about if either will come to terms before this 5-day window that they can negotiate with the Mets ends. Also, we should be getting some coaching news soon. Seems like the Mets might have some candidates lined up for pitching coach and third base coach, but those hires have not been made official yet. So I will wait till they are before we do a show on it. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to be Locked On Mets Insider and be part of our texting service, go to the episode description or to subtext.com/LockedOnMets.